On a crisp autumn evening in Chicago's Gold Coast, the city shimmered with affluence. Bentleys lined the curbs, doormen nodded to fur-draped women, and penthouse lights flickered like stars against the darkening skyline. In a ballroom, tucked inside the Langham Hotel, a charity gala unfolded like a scene out of a dream. Jazz floated from the quartet in the corner. Waiters glided between guests with trays of champagne, and the city's elite mingled in designer gowns and custom-tailored suits. At the center of it all stood Evan Brooks, a 36-year-old tech mogul whose rise to fame had become a modern legend. A black man who had built Phoenix Cypher, a billion-dollar cybersecurity empire, from a cramped dorm room at MIT. Evan was the kind of success story America both celebrated and questioned. Sharp, self-made, and strikingly handsome in a midnight blue tuxedo, he exuded the kind of calm charisma that made people lean in when he spoke. But this evening, all eyes were drawn, not to him, but to the woman beside him, Veronica Lang. Blonde, poised, radiant in a backless emerald gown, she moved with the effortless grace of someone used to being admired. A former PR executive turned full-time philanthropist, Veronica was the picture of elegance and charm. She had entered Evan's life 10 months prior and quickly become his constant companion, smiling at every gala, standing at his side during tech conferences, and posting curated photos of their love on social media with captions like power and passion. Their recent engagement had stunned the public. A whirlwind romance, some called it. But to Evan, it was destiny. Or so he believed. Not everyone shared his conviction. Sitting at a nearby table, her posture impeccable despite the discomfort tightening her chest, was Olivia Brooks, Evan's 62-year-old mother. A retired criminal court judge with steel in her spine and warmth in her eyes, Olivia had spent her life navigating courtroom deception. She knew how to read people, how to listen for what was not said, how to recognize when a smile was too perfect, too polished. And something about Veronica didn't sit right. It wasn't just her changing backstory. First, she was from Seattle. Then she mentioned growing up in Atlanta, or the way she flinched ever so slightly when Evan spoke about his childhood in the South Side. It was something deeper, intangible. A shift in her tone when speaking to Evan's colleagues, a flash of irritation when Olivia asked about her family's past. Every time Olivia tried to bond with her future daughter-in-law, she felt like she was reaching through glass. "You don't trust her," Evan said quietly as they sat in the back seat of his Rolls-Royce after the gala. "I don't trust what I don't know," Olivia replied gently, folding her hands in her lap. "And I don't know her, Evan. Not really. She's smart, kind, driven. She makes me happy," he insisted, his tone clipped with defensiveness. "She's also evasive," Olivia countered. "She says the right things, but there's something behind her eyes, like she's always performing." Evan sighed, his fingers tightening on the steering wheel. "You just can't accept that I chose someone who's not like you." Olivia didn't reply. Not because he was right, but because she knew something he didn't. She had seen too many lives unravel in her courtroom from misplaced trust. And while she hoped to be wrong, her instincts screamed otherwise, the kind of scream that kept her awake long after the city had gone to sleep. That night, Olivia sat at her desk and began to dig. Not out of jealousy, not out of possessiveness, but out of love. She combed through public records, social media history, old PR files. What she found wasn't incriminating, yet, but it was slippery, inconsistent job dates, a college degree that couldn't be verified, friends who were all conveniently abroad or off the grid. Veronica was a ghost dressed in luxury. The next morning, over coffee, Olivia watched Veronica laugh as she fed Evan bits of croissant at a downtown cafe. To anyone else, it was a picture of affection. To Olivia, it was a performance. The subtle glance Veronica gave to the neighboring table before leaning in. The way her voice lilted a decibel higher when she knew she had an audience. Later that week, the cracks deepened. At a brunch with Evan's mentors, Veronica dismissed a question about her past with a joke. "Oh, who remembers college?" That was ages ago. But her eyes flared briefly, just enough for Olivia to catch it. Then came the slip about her mother, who was supposedly deceased, yet mentioned as recovering well in a casual comment. Evan didn't notice. Olivia did. Then came the moment that changed everything. Olivia stopped by Evan's condo unannounced to drop off a family photo album, an olive branch. Veronica was alone, barefoot, pacing the kitchen on a heated call. She hadn't heard Olivia enter. Her voice, normally saccharine, was razor sharp. "Yes, I said 3 more weeks. No, he still hasn't asked about the prenup. Stop rushing me. He trusts me. Once I'm in, we'll have access to everything." Olivia froze. Her breath caught in her throat. "I know his mother's nosy," Veronica continued, her voice a whisper now. "But I've got her handled. She won't be a problem." The words settled like ice in Olivia's veins. She backed out of the apartment silently, her pulse thundering in her ears. Whatever was happening, this wasn't love. It wasn't about connection or companionship. This was something far more calculated. And if Olivia didn't act soon, her son, the man she had raised with every ounce of strength and sacrifice, was going to marry a stranger, a dangerous one. The perfect image was cracking, and behind it, something truly sinister was beginning to show. By the time Olivia Brooks left her son's condo that evening, the city's golden lights glimmered through a veil of mist settling over Lake Michigan. Her heart beat heavy with clarity. What she had heard, Veronica's voice, cold and calculating, was more than just suspicion confirmed. It was a declaration of intent. And Evan, blinded by love, wouldn't believe it unless the truth was undeniable. Olivia had spent a lifetime discerning lies in courtrooms, but now her most important case was personal. She couldn't confront Veronica outright. That would only give her time to vanish, to pivot and manipulate. She couldn't go to Evan either. Not yet. She needed evidence, something irrefutable, something that couldn't be spun by charm or deflected by another performance. So Olivia did something no one, not even Evan, would ever have expected. She disappeared, and Maria Ramirez appeared in her place. Maria Ramirez was a quiet, unassuming woman in her mid-60s, with streaks of gray hair, slightly stooped shoulders, and an accent shaped by years of carefully learned dialect. She wore a uniform bought from a janitorial supply store and carried a resume forged from the digital remains of real housekeepers who had worked in similar buildings. Her ID looked authentic. Her voice was soft. Her gaze was low. She applied for a housekeeping position at Veronica's penthouse residence in Millennium Tower. It worked. Veronica barely looked up from her phone when Maria entered the room for her interview. "Discretion is a must," she had said, sipping green juice from a crystal glass. "I host a lot of important guests. No snooping, no questions. You clean, you leave. Got it?" "Yes, ma'am," Olivia replied, in a voice she barely recognized as her own. "You start tomorrow, 5 sharp." The next morning, Olivia showed up with a dustpan in one hand and a wire-bound notebook tucked discreetly inside her cleaning cart. She began to document everything: Veronica's real phone number, her private calendar, the names of men who visited late at night, the woman who always wore a red trench coat and left through the fire escape, the files on her desk, the messages scrawled in careless handwriting across scrap paper with foreign bank names and routing codes. But what struck Olivia most, what pierced her more deeply than the deceit, was how easily Veronica discarded her facade when no one she needed to impress was watching. She was cruel, not loud, not obvious, but precise in her cuts. She snapped at the doorman for opening the door too slowly, mocked the delivery guy's accent, tossed her shoes toward Maria without a glance. When she spilled wine on the rug one afternoon, she didn't ask for help. She screamed, "Are you blind, Maria? Clean it before it sets. I swear, you people are all the same." Olivia swallowed the bile rising in her throat. She had prosecuted racists before. But standing there, as a woman of color being spoken to like dirt, by the woman her son planned to marry, was a pain unlike any she'd known. Still, she endured it. Because every insult was another crack in Veronica's armor. Every outburst, another piece of the truth. And then, there was the visitor. He came on a Thursday afternoon. Tall, sharply dressed, with a trimmed beard and knowing smile. Veronica greeted him at the door with a kiss too intimate to mistake. "Derek," she whispered, her arms around his neck. "We're so close. Just 2 more weeks." "I don't know how you do it," he murmured. "Pretending you like him." "Ugh." Veronica laughed. "It's not so hard. He's eager to please. But when I think of that smug mother of his sniffing around, makes my skin crawl. I'll be rid of her soon enough." Olivia stood silently behind the closed pantry door, recording every word. The following week, she found what she needed: a laptop tucked behind a false panel in the bedroom closet. The password was simple: Evan's birthday. Inside were spreadsheets, emails, wire transfer plans, prenup avoidance strategies, and lists of Evan's patents and company assets. One document titled Post-Marriage Strategy mapped out how to extract assets over 6 months using shell accounts and third-party investors. It was fraud. It was corporate theft. It was betrayal on a level even Olivia hadn't fully imagined. But still, she didn't break cover. Not yet. One day, as Olivia polished the marble countertops, Veronica spoke loudly on the phone. She has no idea. She looks at me like I'm some gold digger, but jokes on her. I'm a diamond thief. Evan's just the door I had to unlock. She laughed, and something in Olivia cracked, not from rage, but from heartbreak. Because her son, who had worked so hard to be seen, to be respected, was about to be broken by someone who only saw him as a transaction. Later that night, Olivia stood in front of her mirror, peeling off her wig. Her skin was tired. Her shoulders ached. But her eyes, they were sharper than ever. The plan was no longer just to expose a fraud. It was to save her son from a woman who had rehearsed her role perfectly. Until now, it began with a quiet Thursday evening and a wine spill. A small misstep with consequences larger than Olivia Brooks could have anticipated. Veronica had hosted 2 women that evening, both gliding into the penthouse like they belonged to another world. One wore diamonds as if they were paper clips. The other spoke in a clipped accent, that hinted at elite boarding schools and boardroom takeovers. Olivia, still disguised as Maria, was polishing the silver trays in the kitchen when the women arrived. She caught only snippets at first, but the energy was unmistakable. This was no casual girls' night. It was strategy. Veronica greeted them with air kisses and poured vintage wine into crystal glasses. "Everything's on schedule," she said, her voice low but triumphant. "The prenup's been dodged, the software access is nearly complete, and Evan is, well, putty." The three women laughed, a practice sound, like a chorus of queens in a castle built of mirrors and shadows. Maria was instructed to stay in the kitchen, but Olivia had learned how to listen without being seen. She moved silently, planting her recording device behind a decorative vase near the doorway, just inches from the edge of the living room. The voices drifted in, growing bolder with each passing minute. "He's not a fool, Veronica," one woman said, "but he's hungry. You can always manipulate hunger." "Exactly," Veronica replied. "Validation is his drug. I feed him compliments, flash a little vulnerability, and suddenly he's confiding in me like I'm his personal therapist. He doesn't even realize he's handing over his kingdom piece by piece." "And his mother?" the other asked, her voice sharper now. "She suspects something, but she's too proud to confront me directly. Evan thinks she's just being overbearing. He's already started pulling away from her. She doesn't even know I made him cancel their weekly dinners." A strange chill rolled through Olivia then, as if the betrayal wasn't aimed at her son, but at something deeper, at legacy, at love, at the sacred bond between a mother and the child she raised with grit and sleepless nights. Veronica hadn't just preyed on Evan's ambition. She'd targeted his soul. But Olivia wasn't just a mother. She was a former investigator who had built entire cases on whispers and nuance. She had cracked open corruption rings and dismantled lies that spanned decades. And now she was ready to move beyond passive listening. She was going to embed herself in Veronica's world. The next week, Veronica mentioned a charity gala she was hosting, a faux event meant to polish her image and mask the transactions going on in the background. "Maria, I'll need you on call that night," she had said, tossing a to-do list onto the kitchen island. "I can't have my guests stepping on dust." "Yes, Miss Veronica," Olivia said softly, while making mental notes of the names on the guest list. A surprising number were pulled from the world of tech, finance, and venture capital. People who had every reason to be skeptical of scams and schemes, but who also loved the thrill of exclusivity. These were Veronica's targets, Olivia realized. Evan wasn't her only mark. He was simply the most valuable one. The night of the gala, the penthouse transformed. Soft lighting, classical music, waitstaff in crisp uniforms. Veronica played hostess flawlessly, graceful, attentive, effortlessly radiant. But Olivia watched her with new eyes. Every smile was strategic. Every compliment rehearsed. What Veronica didn't expect was that Maria would blend in perfectly. Olivia had ditched her faded apron for a more formal staff uniform and walked through the room as invisible as a shadow. She delivered drinks, passed hors d'oeuvres, and lingered just long enough to hear key conversations. She heard Veronica talking to a man from Zurich about portfolio merging and another from Dubai about offshore coordination. She spoke in coded language, but to Olivia, it was as clear as confession. The most damning moment came when Veronica led a small group, including a known venture capitalist and two women Olivia recognized from previous visits, into her private study. Olivia slipped in after them under the pretense of cleaning a wine glass stain from the wall. "They think I'm marrying for love," Veronica said once the door clicked shut. "But we're marrying for leverage. In 6 months, the software will be sold. Evan will be left with a PR nightmare, and I'll be far away. No one will be able to trace it." "Are you sure he won't suspect anything before the wedding?" one guest asked. "He's blinded by the idea of us, and he's terrified of proving his mother right." The group laughed, unaware that just 6 feet away, Olivia was recording every word. That night, as the last guest left and Veronica tossed her heels into a corner, she turned to Olivia with a smug smirk. "You know, Maria," she said, pouring herself a final glass of champagne, "sometimes I wonder if Evan's mother ever knew what real power looked like. Because if she did, she'd recognize it when she saw me." Olivia nodded quietly and responded, "Maybe she sees more than you think." Veronica didn't catch the meaning. She just waved her off. "Go home. I'll see you in the morning." But Olivia wouldn't be back as Maria again. She had everything she needed. The voice recordings, the guest interactions, the offshore account numbers she had discreetly photographed from an open document on Veronica's desk. Now, it was time to become Olivia Brooks again. Not the maid, not the silent witness, but the mother who was about to expose a thief before she ever said, "I do." The morning of the wedding arrived wrapped in soft sunlight, a deceptive calm before the storm. The city buzzed with weekend joy, the kind that filled sidewalks with coffee cups and flower bouquets. But in the Brooks family's world, everything was teetering on the edge of revelation. Olivia stood in her modest Harlem apartment, her disguise now stored away in a locked drawer, her real face bare before the mirror. The woman staring back at her wasn't just a mother anymore. She was the quiet storm about to shatter a very dangerous illusion. The night before, she had sent the final audio files to Keith Henderson, Evan's lifelong friend and now COO of Brooks Tech. Keith, who had always been wary of Veronica, but never had evidence to validate his gut, called her instantly. "I knew something was off," he said, voice thick with a mix of frustration and fury. "You're sure about this?" "I heard it with my own ears," Olivia replied. "They've been planning this for months. The software, the money, Evan's emotional leverage. She never loved him. She was acting from day one." Keith didn't hesitate. "We stop it. I'll handle the legal side. You talk to your son. He needs to hear it from you." But that, Olivia knew, would be the hardest part. Evan had grown increasingly distant ever since Veronica entered his life. He was defensive any time she brought up concerns, convinced she was judging Veronica through a lens of generational difference, or worse, racial insecurity. Olivia never blamed him. She knew the world taught black men to question even the purest forms of protection. But today, all of that would change. At 9:12 a.m., Olivia texted him a single line. "Please meet me before the ceremony. Alone. It's urgent. Trust me. Just this once." It was unlike her to be dramatic, and that's why Evan took it seriously. He arrived at her apartment in a tailored black tuxedo, the one his father once wore to a fundraiser decades ago. He looked regal, successful, like the man she had raised to believe he could do anything, be anything. But the moment he stepped through the door and saw the expression on her face, something shifted. He set his cufflinks on the table. "Mom, what's going on?" She didn't waste time. Olivia opened her laptop and pressed play. Veronica's voice filled the room, a toxic melody masked in laughter. She spoke of Evan as a fool, of his mother as a nuisance to be removed. She mocked the idea of marriage, bragged about the stolen software code, named her co-conspirators, and mapped out the entire scheme like a blueprint to betrayal. Evan's shoulders tensed, his eyes narrowed, jaw clenched. By the time the recording ended, he hadn't said a word. Olivia closed the laptop gently, her hands trembling. "I know this hurts, baby, but I couldn't let you walk into a trap. Not on my watch. Not while I'm still breathing." Silence stretched between them. Then Evan sat down, burying his face in his hands. "I defended her," he whispered. "I turned away from you because I thought you just couldn't see her the way I did." "You weren't wrong to want to believe in her," Olivia said softly. "You were wrong to ignore your own instincts." He looked up, his eyes red but clear. "What do I do now?" "You show up," she said, her voice strengthening. "Not to marry her, but to face her and take back your name, your company, your peace." 2 hours later, in the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel, everything was set. Guests arrived dressed to the nines. The string quartet played soft renditions of classic love songs. Champagne flowed, and Veronica, glowing in a custom silk gown that glistened like ice, stood in front of the mirror in the bridal suite, admiring the woman she had fooled the world into believing she was. But the illusion was crumbling. At exactly noon, Evan entered the venue. Alone. No best man. No smile. Just a stack of documents in his hand and a security team stationed at each exit. He walked past shocked guests who began whispering as the music faltered. He stepped up to the stage where the officiant stood confused. "There's no wedding today," Evan announced, voice calm but commanding. There never was. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Veronica appeared in the doorway of the bridal suite, confusion turning quickly into fury. "What is this?" she demanded, storming forward. "You don't get to ask questions today," Evan said, lifting the microphone. "Today, I speak." He turned to the audience. "I want to thank you all for coming. I know you flew in, took time off, bought gifts, and I wish this were a celebration, but it's not. It's a reckoning." He played the recordings aloud, every damning word. Veronica's betrayal spilled across the ballroom, unfiltered and undeniable. Her plans, her lies, her contempt. The silence that followed was suffocating. Veronica's face paled. She tried to interject, to spin the narrative, but Olivia stepped forward then, dressed not as a maid, not as a detective, but as a mother who refused to be silenced. She held up a small flash drive. "This contains documents and recordings that have already been sent to federal authorities. You plan to steal national security level tech and sell it abroad. You won't be walking away from this." Veronica's mask shattered. She lunged toward Evan, shouting, "You were nothing before me. I made you whole." Evan didn't flinch. "Number you tried to break me, but I was raised by a woman who made sure I knew what strength looked like." The police arrived minutes later. Veronica was handcuffed, still yelling threats and denials. Guests filed out in shocked silence. Some offered Olivia nods of respect. Others avoided her gaze. But none questioned the truth anymore. And as the ballroom emptied, Evan stood next to his mother, the woman who risked everything to save him. "You didn't just stop a wedding," he said. "You saved my life." She smiled, wrapping her arm around him. "That's what love does. It protects, even when it hurts. The wedding that never was became the moment everything changed. Not just for Evan, but for every person who witnessed what happens when truth walks in, dressed in dignity, and deceit is dragged out screaming. In the weeks that followed the public unraveling of the wedding that never was, the world that Evan Brooks had so carefully constructed was no longer the same. The headlines faded from front pages, but the ripple effect of that one moment, the moment he stood beside his mother and let the truth ring out across the plaza's marble halls, echoed through his life in more powerful ways than he could have imagined. He spent the first few days in solitude. No meetings, no media appearances, no calls. Just long walks through Riverside Park with his phone off and his thoughts loud. The betrayal had been deeply personal. Not just the fraud, not just the manipulation of a company he had built from the ground up, but the emotional severing of trust. He had allowed someone into the sacred corners of his world, into the private chambers of his vulnerability, and in return, he had been deceived. But as the pain began to settle, a new truth emerged, not one rooted in anger, but in clarity. It came late one evening as he sat on the same couch where Veronica once curled up beside him, pretending to care about the things that defined his soul. Olivia was across from him, flipping through old family photo albums, her eyes pausing on an image of him at age 10, holding his first science fair ribbon. "She never saw this part of you," she said softly, tapping the photo. The boy who used to take apart radios just to see how they worked. The boy who built a security algorithm in a school library while everyone else was playing basketball. She only saw the dollar signs, Evan, not the dreamer. Evan leaned back, exhaling deeply. "I wanted to be seen, not just admired. I thought love meant being chosen, even when I had to ignore the red flags waving in my face." Olivia closed the album. "You weren't wrong for wanting love. You were wrong for thinking it required sacrificing your intuition." That conversation marked the start of something new, a rebuilding. Not of Brooks Tech. That remained solid, thanks to Keith's leadership and swift internal audits, but of Evan himself. He returned to the office a week later, not with his usual suit and tie, but in jeans and a pullover. No press, no statement. Just a quiet nod to his team that said, "We're moving forward." He launched a new initiative within the company called Integrity First, a values-driven protocol that elevated transparency, employee well-being, and ethical oversight to the highest level of priority. Under that umbrella, he partnered with nonprofits working to expose financial scams targeting people of color, women, and the elderly, the most frequent victims of emotional fraud. It wasn't just about tech anymore. It was about impact. Meanwhile, Olivia was becoming something of a legend in her own right. Though she never sought attention, word spread quickly about the woman who went undercover to save her son. She was approached to consult with private investigation firms, nonprofits, even a docuseries producer from a major streaming platform. She declined most of it. Instead, she focused on something quieter, more healing, a mentorship group for mothers who felt unheard when trying to protect their children from toxic relationships. She named it The Circle. Once a week, she sat in a small community center in Harlem, surrounded by women of all backgrounds and ages, sharing stories, offering wisdom, and simply listening. Sometimes, healing didn't come from grand gestures or courtroom victories. Sometimes, it came from saying, "You're not crazy. I believe you." Evan visited once. He sat in the back, quietly observing as his mother guided the conversation with calm strength. When it ended, a woman approached him and said, "Your mother saved more than just you." She gave us permission to speak. It humbled him in a way that success never had. As the months passed, Evan slowly allowed himself to imagine love again, but differently this time. Without illusions, without performance. He learned to ask better questions, to listen to the silences between words, to understand that love wasn't about being dazzled, it was about being understood. And every Sunday, no matter how busy the week had been, he showed up at Olivia's place with groceries and flowers. They'd cook, laugh, argue about old music, and sit on the fire escape watching the city lights flicker like the heartbeat of a place that had once nearly swallowed him whole. Healing didn't come all at once, but it came honestly. And in the truth, Evan found something stronger than what he'd lost. A foundation built not on fantasy, but on faith. Faith in himself. Faith in the people who had never stopped protecting him. Faith that even in heartbreak, there is always a path to healing when love leads the way. In the whirlwind of deception, heartbreak, and redemption, the story of Evan Brooks and his mother Olivia reminds us that truth, no matter how painful, is always a gift. What began as a high-profile love story between a successful tech CEO and a seemingly perfect woman unraveled into a tangled web of manipulation, betrayal, and near catastrophe. Evan, blinded by charm and the desire for connection, almost lost everything. His company, his reputation, and the very foundation of trust he had built with those who truly loved him. But standing between him and disaster was his mother, strong, unshaken, and unwilling to let her son be consumed by a lie. Olivia's courage to go undercover, to endure degradation and racism, and to infiltrate a life built on deceit was not just a mother's act of love, it was an act of justice. Through her quiet strength and sharp instincts, she not only exposed a professional con artist, but revealed a truth that saved her son's future. She reminded us that love is not passive. Love is active. Love protects. Love questions. And when needed, love stands in front of the fire so those we care for don't burn. Evan's journey didn't end with heartbreak. It began with it. Out of the ashes of betrayal came a man reborn, more discerning, more grounded, and more connected to his values than ever before. He learned to stop mistaking admiration for love, performance for authenticity, and charm for character. And perhaps most importantly, he learned to trust the voice of those who love him, not because they always say what he wants to hear, but because they say what he needs to. This story isn't just about a failed engagement or a heroic mother. It's about seeing clearly. It's about knowing that sometimes the people who challenge us the most love us the deepest. It's about understanding that intuition is not fear. It's wisdom passed down through experience, and when we ignore it, we do so at our peril. So what can we take from this? In today's world, where appearances are curated and deception can be dressed in elegance, we must learn to see beyond the surface. Whether in business, relationships, or friendships, integrity matters. Truth matters. And the people who love you enough to fight for you, even when you push them away, are the ones worth holding close. If this story moved you, inspired you, or reminded you of your own journey through trust and truth, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue to tell powerful, real, and meaningful stories like this one. And who knows? The next story might just be the one you need to hear. Stay with us. The truth is always worth uncovering.